one-line essence. The Charter Act of 1813 ended most of the East India Company's trade monopoly, except tea China, kept its political rule, opened India to British merchants, allowed missionaries, and granted money, a big step turning the company from a trader into mainly an administrator. Detailed summary, simple words. 1. Why this act happened. Short reasons. The company had grown from a trading firm into a big territorial power in India. People in Britain argued it was wrong for one body to be both ruler and conflict of interest. New ideas of free trade, laissez-faire, were popular. Napoleon's continental system shut European markets, so British merchants wanted new markets, India. Result, pressure mounted in Parliament to open Indian trade to other British merchants. 2. Main things the act did. Clear bullets. 1. Ended the company's general monopoly on trade with India, except the company kept exclusive rights over tea and the China trade. Meaning, from 1813 most British merchants could trade with India freely. Company no longer had sole trading rights, but still kept tea China. 2. Company kept political governing power. The East India Company still collected taxes, administered law and order, and ruled territories under British supervision. 3. Opened India to British merchants. Private British traders could now go to India and do business. This increased the flow of British manufactured goods into Indian markets. 4. Missionaries allowed to come and work in India. Earlier, the company discouraged missionary activity. After 1813, it could no longer legally block missionaries. Christian missionaries began working more openly. 5. Education and translation grant established. Parliament provided a yearly grant, famous figure, 1 lakh rupees per year, to promote education, translation of useful works into Indian languages, and printing, the first official government money to support Western learning and education in India. 6. British government supervision continued. The Board of Control, London Supervision, still oversaw the company's political actions. The company did not become independent. 3. Immediate effects, what happened right after. More British merchants arrived in India, trade increased. The company's commercial role shrank and its administrative role grew. It became more of a government than a trading company. Missionary activity expanded. Schools, translations, and missionary publishing began to appear more widely. Education funding started the growth of Western-style schools and translations, which gradually produced an English-educated Indian class. Hack 4. Long-term consequences, why it matters in history. The act began the separation of the company's trading business from its governing role. This trend continued until the company's trade functions were removed almost entirely, later acts, and finally the company became purely an administrative authority. It laid foundations for modern education and the spread of English in India. Important for later social and political changes. Opening trade strengthened Britain's industrial exports to India. India became a large market for British manufacturers. It set a path toward further regulation, 1833, 1853, and eventual transfer of rule to the British Crown in 1858 after the Revolt of 1857. 5. Simple analogies to make it very clear. Shop plus mayor problem. The company was like a shopkeeper who also became the mayor. People said, you should not be the only shop and also run the city. 1813 told the shopkeeper, you can stay mayor, ruler, but others may open shops, trade. School grant. Parliament's education money is like a government scholarship to start new schools and translate books into local languages. 6. Short timeline to place it. 1773, Regulating Act, first big regulation. 1784, Pitt's India Act, Board of Control, more London oversight. 1786, 1793, amendments strengthening Governor General's power and company control. We covered these earlier. 1813, Charter Act, ends most trade monopoly, allows missionaries, funds education. 1833, company's commercial activities almost ended. It became primarily administrative. 1857 to 1858, Revolt of 1857. Company rule ends. British Crown takes direct control. Government of India Act 1858. 7. Memory hooks, easy to recall. 1813, mostly open, still rules, missionary and education. Mostly opens, trade opened, except tea China. Still rules equals company keeps political control. Missionary and education equals mission work allowed plus annual education grant. If you want, I can now make a one-page revision sheet with the exact short bullets for quick memorizing, or produce a 4-panel colored comic showing the key moments: merchants asking, Parliament deciding, missionaries arriving, schools opening. Which would you like next? Perfect. Let me now give you a great, deep, detailed, and very simple summary of the Charter Act of 1813 in the easiest words so that you understand every part clearly like a beginner. Summary of the Charter Act of 1813, step by step. 1. Renewal of the company's charter. Every 20 years, the British Parliament had to decide whether the East India Company could continue to rule and trade in India. In 1813, it was time to renew this charter. But by this time, there were many debates about the company's monopoly, exclusive right, in trade. End of monopoly with India. The Act said the East India Company lost its monopoly, exclusive right to trade with India. Now, any Englishman, private traders could trade with India. Example, earlier, only the company could bring cotton or indigo from India to Britain. After 1813, other British merchants could also do this. Monopoly still kept in China and tea. The company, however, still kept its monopoly in China trade, especially silk and porcelain, tea trade. This was because tea was a huge moneymaker in Britain, and the company did not want to lose control over it. 4. Shareholders protected. The shareholders of the East India Company, rich investors in England, were angry that the monopoly was being reduced. To calm them, Parliament promised they would still get a 10% dividend, profit share every year, paid from Indian revenues. Meaning, even if they lost trade profit, they would earn income from Indian taxes. 5. Sovereignty of the Crown. The Act clearly stated for the first time the territories of India were under the sovereignty, supreme authority of the British Crown. The East India Company could continue to rule for 20 more years, but ultimately the Crown, the British King, Queen, and Parliament, real authority. This was important to India's rule a clear constitutional status. 6. Separation of accounts. The company was asked to keep 2 separate accounts, one for its commercial trade, buying, selling goods, one for its territorial revenue, money from ruling land. This was done so no one could hide profits or mix ruling money with trading money. 7. Stronger Board of Control. The Board of Control in London, created by Pitt's India Act of 1784, had its powers increased. This meant the British government in London had more control over the company's political decisions in India. 8. Education Clause, most famous part. The Act said 1,000, 1 lakh rupees, every year must be spent on promoting Indian literature, encouraging learned Indians, spreading modern science and knowledge among Indians. This was the first time the British government took responsibility for education in India. Later, this clause became very important in India's education history, leading to debates like Orientalist versus Anglicist, whether to promote Sanskrit, Persian, or English science. Why the Charter Act of 1813 is important. 1. Ended companies' monopoly with India, opened trade, kept companies' monopoly with China and tea. 3. Gave British Crown clear sovereignty over India. 4. Forced separate accounting, trade versus revenue. 5. Enlarged powers of Board of Control. 6. Introduced state responsibility for education, 100,000 clause. In short, the Charter Act of 1813 was a turning point. It reduced the company's trading power, confirmed the Crown's sovereignty, and for the first time promised money for Indian education. Would you like me to now make a visual-style flowchart or diagram, step-by-step boxes, of this act so you can remember it even? Perfect. Now that you've learned the full line-by-line explanation, let me give you a great, deep summary of the Charter Act of 1813 in the simplest possible words. Think of this as a final wrap-up, where all the scattered parts come together in one clear picture. Charter Act of 1813, summary, simplest deep detail. 1. Background. The East India Company had monopoly, exclusive right, over trade with India. But around 1813, 3 big changes pushed Britain to rethink this monopoly. 1. Napoleon's continental system in Europe. British traders lost European markets. 2. Laissez-faire, free trade ideas. Many wanted open trade, not monopoly. 3. British capitalists and merchants, angry because they couldn't access India's huge markets. 4. Missionaries and reformers wanted entry into India to spread Christianity and education. Because of all this pressure, the British Parliament passed the Charter Act of 1813. 2. Main provisions, key points. Let's go point by point. 1. End of monopoly, partially. East India Company lost monopoly over trade with India, but company kept monopoly on tea trade and trade with China. 2. Education of Indians. Company was ordered to spend $100,000 every year on Indian education. This was the first official step by the British towards education in India. 3. Missionaries allowed. Christian missionaries were allowed to go to India for religious work, moral teaching, and conversions. 4. Separate accounts. Company was both ruler, collecting taxes, and trader, doing business. Act ordered, keep territorial revenues, taxes from land, separate from commercial profits, trade earnings. 5. Company debt and dividend. Company had a lot of debt. Act asked for debt reduction, fixed shareholder dividend at 10.5% per year. 6. Power to local governments. Local governments, under British courts like Calcutta Supreme Court, could now impose taxes. 3. Why it matters. Significance. Opened India's trade to all British merchants, ending a 200-year monopoly, except tea and China. Introduced the first step in Indian education under British rule. Allowed missionaries, which had a lasting cultural and religious impact. Improved financial management by separating trade money and tax money. Controlled companies' debt and shareholder profits. Strengthened local government's role in tax collection. One-line super summary. The Charter Act of 1813 ended the company's monopoly over Indian trade, except tea and China, forced it to spend on Indian education, allowed missionaries to enter, regulated its finances, and gave power to local governments to tax. Think of it like this. Britain told the East India Company, share India's trade with others. Pay attention to education, let missionaries in, keep your accounts neat, control your debts, and let local governments tax people. Would you like me to now make a comic-style story memory trick, like turning these 6 provisions into characters in a funny scene, so you can recall the Charter Act of 1813 in seconds during exams? All right, you want a great, deep, detailed summary of the impact of the Charter Act of 1813, simplest possible language, so that it is crystal clear. Bring everything together in one strong wrap-up. Impact of the Charter Act of 1813, deep, detailed summary. 1. Small steps in social reforms, but no real change in rule. The East India Company was asked to spend some money, $1,000 a year, on Indian education. This looked like a positive step for social improvement. But in reality, it was too small and had almost no effect on the lives of most Indians. The way India was governed by the company remained the same, still focused on control and profit. So little progress in education, but no real political reform. Naxsharma 2. India's constitutional position clarified. For the first time, the Act clearly said what India was in the eyes of Britain. India was not simply the company's private property. Instead, India's territories were part of the British Empire, under the authority of the British Parliament, though the company still managed them. This was an important step in making India officially a colony of Britain, not just a trading ground of the company. Naxsharma 3. Taxation powers to local governments. The Act gave local British governments in India, in Calcutta, Bombay, Madras, etc., the right to collect taxes directly from Indians. They were also given power to punish anyone who refused to pay. This made British control over the daily lives of Indians much stronger. Taxes became a direct tool of authority and control. 4. Real purpose. British economic interest. Although the Act seemed to bring reforms, education spending, rules on governance, taxation, the true aim was not Indian welfare. Every step was designed to strengthen Britain's economy and empire. Example, education was promoted, but only in ways that would produce clerks and helpers for British administration. Tax powers were given, but only to make sure Britain got steady revenue. So Indians gained little, while Britain gained much more control and profit. Final one-paragraph summary. The Charter Act of 1813 had limited social effects. It introduced small spending on Indian education, but brought no real changes in governance. Its biggest impact was that it clearly defined India's constitutional position as part of the British Empire, under Parliament's authority. It also gave local governments in India the power to collect taxes and punish defaulters, which tightened British control. However, all these measures were aimed mainly at serving the economic interests of Britain, not improving the lives of Indians. In short, it looked like Britain was helping India, but in reality, the act only made Britain's control stronger and its profits safer. Would you like me to now make a timeline-style flow? Before Act, Provisions, Impact, so you can quickly revise both the causes, provisions, and impact of the Act of 1813 in one go? Perfect. Great, deepest, and detailed summary of this whole passage on the Charter Act of 1833, circumstances leading to it. I will make it very simple, clear, and step-by-step so that even a beginner, you will understand everything. Summary of the circumstances leading to the Charter Act of 1833. 1. Time gap between 1813 and 1833. Between the Charter Act of 1813 and the Charter Act of 1833, there was a gap of 20 years. In these 20 years, huge changes happened in Britain, England. These changes directly influenced how they ruled India. 2. The Industrial Revolution, Machine Age. Britain experienced the Industrial Revolution. This means machines started replacing handwork. Because of machines, production became faster and cheaper. Example, a cloth piece made by hand in 5 days could now be made in a few hours. Goods became cheaper and could be made in very large quantities. These cheap goods, like cloth, metal goods, etc., were sent to other countries, including India. This made the British more business-minded and profit-focused. They wanted free access to markets like India to sell their goods. 3. More money, new spirit of independence. Because of new trade and exports, a lot of money started flowing into Britain. With this new wealth, British people became more confident and wanted independence in thought and lifestyle. They no longer blindly followed old traditions. Instead, they wanted freedom and fairness. 4. Rise of new social class, working class and intelligentsia. Machines created a new problem. Workers, laborers, were often exploited in factories. A new educated group of people, called the intelligentsia, thinking class, started speaking up for workers' rights. They said, laborers are human beings too, and they deserve respect and fairness. Writers, thinkers, and reformers began spreading ideas of equality, justice, and dignity. 5. The Whigs come to power, 1830. In 1830, a political group called the Whigs came into power in Britain. They were liberal, reformist in nature. They believed in modern ideas like rights of man, every human deserves rights; freedom, less interference from rulers; reforms, changing laws for fairness. 6. The Great Reform Act of 1832. In 1832, Britain passed a very important law, the Reform Act. This act gave more people the right to vote, especially the middle class, not just the rich nobles. It was a step toward democracy in Britain. It showed that Britain was serious about reform, fairness, and recognizing the dignity of all people. 7. Spread of laissez-faire. Around this time, the idea of laissez-faire became popular. Laissez-faire equals let it be, meaning the government should not interfere too much in trade and economy. Example, if two people want to do business, the government should not impose too many restrictions. This idea encouraged free trade, which meant that the East India Company's monopoly had to end, and trade with India should be open for all. 8. Overall atmosphere, reforms everywhere. In short, Britain in the 1830s was full of new ideas, reforms, and changes. Machines revolutionized life. People demanded fairness and rights. Political changes, Whigs, Reform Act, supported equality. Free trade ideas, laissez-faire, were gaining ground. All of this created the perfect background for the Charter Act of 1833. Final deep summary in one flow. Between 1813 and 1833, Britain changed a lot. The Industrial Revolution created machines, which produced goods cheaply and in huge quantities. These goods were exported abroad, including to India, making Britain eager to open Indian markets. This wealth gave British society a new independent spirit. At the same time, the rise of factory workers led to a new educated class, intelligentsia, demanding fairness and dignity for all humans. In 1830, the liberal Whigs came to power, and in 1832 they passed the Reform Act, giving more people the right to vote and promoting equality. The idea of laissez-faire, free trade without government interference, became strong. Altogether, these changes created an atmosphere of reform and liberty, which prepared the way for the Charter Act of 1833 in India. Would you like me to now explain the Charter Act of 1833 itself, its features, impact, importance, in the same simple word-by-word style after this background? Got it. Let me now give you a great, deep, detailed summary of the passage you shared, but in the simplest words so that even a complete beginner can understand it clearly. Passage in short. It was in this atmosphere of reform and liberal ideas that the Parliament was called upon to view the charter of the company in 1833. There were not a few then in Parliament who advocated that the company should be wound up and that the Crown should take over the administration of India. But this view was not shared by the majority in Parliament, and that body agreed with Macaulay that the company's rule in India had to be continued, though on a different basis. Macaulay was the secretary to the Board of Control, and James Mill, the renowned historian and a disciple of Bentham, occupied a high position at the India House. Their influence is clearly discernible in the Charter Act of 1833. Deep, detailed summary in very simple English. 1. Background. The mood in England. Around 1833, England was full of new ideas: freedom, equality, reform, and justice. Because of these ideas, people wanted to change many old systems, including how India was ruled. 2. Parliament's dilemma. Big question. The British Parliament had to decide what to do with the East India Company's charter, its special license to rule India. Some people in Parliament said, "Why should a trading company rule such a big country like India? Better if the Crown, King, Queen of Britain, rules India directly." In other words, they wanted to end the company's rule. 3. Decision taken. But the majority, most members of Parliament, did not agree with this idea. They thought the company should continue ruling India, but its way of ruling must be changed and reformed to fit new liberal ideas. 4. Macaulay's role. Thomas Babington Macaulay was very important at this time. He was the secretary to the Board of Control, which supervised the company's work in India. He believed India should still be ruled by the company, but under a new, more modern system. 5. James Mill's role. James Mill, a famous historian and philosopher, also had big influence. He was a follower of Jeremy Bentham, a thinker who believed in the greatest good for the greatest number. James Mill worked in the India House, the company's London headquarters. His ideas also shaped the new law. 6. Result. The Charter Act of 1833. The new Act of 1833 was made under the influence of these thinkers, Macaulay and Mill. It kept the company's rule but made major reforms, such as company lost trading activities, became only a ruling body. Governor General of Bengal became Governor General of India, centralized power. First time, the idea of giving Indians jobs in government was written, though not really implemented seriously. Macaulay also pushed for English education in India. Later, he wrote his famous Minute on Education. Super simple analogy. Imagine you have a school that is being run by a private company. Some teachers say, "Let's close this company and let the government run the school directly." But most teachers say, "No, let the company run the school, but we'll change the rules so it is more modern, fair, and better for students." Two smart teachers, Macaulay and James Mill, gave advice on how to change the rules. Finally, new school rules, Charter Act of 1833, were made. Summary in one line. In 1833, Britain decided not to end the East India Company's rule in India, but to reform it under the influence of thinkers like Macaulay and James Mill, which led to the Charter Act of 1833. Would you like me to now make colored comic strips of this explanation, like I did for the earlier one, showing Parliament debating, Macaulay and James Mill giving advice, and finally the act being passed? Perfect. Let's now create a deep, detailed, yet very simple summary of the provisions of the Charter Act of 1833. I'll explain each point clearly in plain words, like teaching from zero. Great, deep, detailed summary of the provisions of the Charter Act of 1833. 1. The company continues, but as a trustee for the Crown. The East India Company was allowed to continue ruling India for 20 more years. Now, it would rule in trust for His Majesty, the King of Britain, his heirs, and successors. This means the company was no longer ruling for its own profit or as an independent master. Instead, it was like a caretaker, a trustee, managing India on behalf of the British Crown. Example, imagine a school where a private company is running it, but the government says, you may run it for 20 years, but remember, you are doing this on our behalf. Test number 2, end of trade monopoly, commercial side of the company. The company lost its monopoly of trade with China. Earlier, it had already lost monopoly over trade with India by the Charter Act of 1813. Now in 1833, even the China trade was taken away. The company was also asked to close down its commercial business as soon as possible. This meant the East India Company stopped being a trading company and became only a political ruler in India. 3. Protection of shareholders. Shareholders of the company were worried. If the company stops trade, what happens to our money? To protect them, the Act guaranteed a fixed of 10.5% every year to shareholders. This would continue until the government bought all the company's stock shares at a rate of £200 for every £100 share. Example, if you had invested money in the company, you would still get guaranteed profits each year, even though the company was no longer trading. 4. Opening India to Europeans. The Act removed all restrictions on Europeans immigrating, settling in India, buying land and property in India. Before this, Europeans could trade but could not freely buy land or settle in India. Now, they could settle, purchase property, and live like colonists. This was the legal opening for European colonization of India. 5. Centralization of administration. This is the most important political provision. Earlier, Bengal, Bombay, and Madras presidencies were somewhat independent. Now everything was centralized under one authority. The Governor-General of Bengal became the Governor-General of India. He and his council, called Governor-General in Council, were given complete power. What powers did the Governor-General in Council get? 1. Control over civil and military affairs. He was the supreme head in both governance and army matters. 2. Control over presidencies, Bengal, Bombay, Madras, and others. No more semi-independence. All came under his authority. 3. Control over revenue and finance. All money collected in India, taxes, land revenue, etc., had to be raised under his authority. He also controlled all spending. In short, all administrative, ruling, and financial money-related powers were now in the hands of the Governor-General in Council. Example, imagine earlier India was like a company with 3 branch managers, Bengal, Bombay, Madras, who had some independence. After this act, one single head office boss, Governor-General of India, controlled everything directly. Simple essence of the Charter Act of 1833. Company continues as trustee of the Crown. Company's trade monopoly fully gone. India plus China trade ended. Shareholders protected with guaranteed profits. India open to European settlers. They can buy land, live permanently. Administration centralized. Governor-General of India became the supreme ruler of all British Indian territories. So the Charter Act of 1833 marked the end of the East India Company as a commercial body and made it a purely administrative political authority on behalf of the Crown. It also marked the beginning of European colonization of India. It made India's administration more centralized and unified under one powerful Governor-General of India. Would you like me to now make a colored comic strip version of these provisions, like we did earlier, so you can visually see them as a fun story? Got it. You want a deep, detailed, yet super simple summary of the passage. I'll explain everything in clear, plain English, but also add extra context so you understand not only what happened, but also why it was important. Background. First, for clarity. Before 1833, British India had different provinces like Madras, Bombay, and Bengal, Calcutta, which had their own powers to make local laws. This sometimes caused confusion because rules in one region could be different from another. The British wanted one strong central authority to make laws for all of India, instead of scattered provincial powers. The Charter Act of 1833 was the turning point for this. Detailed summary of what happened. 1. Centralization of lawmaking. The Act brought all legislative lawmaking power into the hands of the Governor-General of India in Council, based in Calcutta. Provinces like Bombay and Madras lost their lawmaking power. They could only suggest laws, but could not actually pass them. This created legislative centralization, meaning one central authority for all laws in India. Think of it like a school where earlier each classroom teacher made their own rules. Now only the principal makes rules, and teachers can only suggest ideas. Change in the Governor General's Council. Earlier, the Governor General's Council, his main ruling team, had 3 members. The Act added a 4th member, called the Law Member. This law member was a legal expert whose main job was to help in making better laws. In our school example, it's like the principal bringing in a new assistant who is a lawyer teacher so that rules are properly written and fair. 3. Role of the law member. Officially, the law member was supposed to attend only lawmaking meetings of the council. But in practice, the first law member, Thomas Babington Macaulay, was allowed to sit in all meetings, not just lawmaking ones. This gave him great influence on Indian governance. In school terms, the lawyer teacher was supposed to join only when new rules were being discussed, but the principal allowed him in every meeting anyway. 4. Creation of the Law Commission. The Act also created a purpose: bring scattered laws into one place, codify laws, write them clearly in a proper systematic code, improve laws, make them more modern, fair, and practical. The first Law Commission, headed by Macaulay, gave us the Indian Penal Code, IPC, later in 1860, which is still the backbone of criminal law in India today. In school terms, instead of random rules scattered in different classrooms, a special team was made to collect all rules, rewrite them clearly and fix confusing, unfair rules. Why this was important. 1. One law for all. It ended confusion of different laws in different provinces. 2. Centralized power. The Governor General became the supreme lawmaker of India. 3. Professionalization. A legal expert, law member, ensured laws were written better. 4. Modern law system. The Law Commission began the process of codifying Indian law, which shaped India's legal system even after independence. Super simple one-line summary. The Charter Act of 1833 took away Madras and Bombay's power to make laws, gave full legislative power to the Governor General's Council in Calcutta, added a legal expert, Macaulay, as a 4th member, and set up a law commission to organize and improve Indian laws, making India's lawmaking centralized, professional, and systematic. Would you like me to now make a timeline-style explanation, step-by-step like events in order, so you can easily remember it for exams? Perfect. Let me now give you a great, deepest, detailed summary of what you just read about the general provisions of the Charter Act of 1833, especially Section 87, in the simplest possible way. Deep summary of the Charter Act of 1833, Section 87, and slavery provisions. 1. Section 87, Equality in Jobs, in words but not in action. The Act of 1833 introduced Section 87. It said, no Indian or British subject living in India should be disqualified, stopped from getting a government job just because of religion, birthplace, family background, or skin color. In short, religion, race, caste, color, or birthplace should not be reasons to stop someone from a job. The directors of the company explained, this rule does not set new qualifications, like education or skill exams. It only removes old disqualifications, like being Indian, Hindu, Muslim, dark-skinned, etc. Idea, there should be no special governing caste in British India. Meaning, British rulers said, no one group, like only Britishers, should be the permanent rulers. Everyone should be judged only on fitness, ability, skill. Example for clarity. Before this, imagine a job advertisement. Only British Christians can apply. After Section 87, it should be like, anyone who is skilled enough can apply, whether Hindu, Muslim, Indian, British, black, or white. On paper, this was a big promise of equality. 2. Reality. Promise was not kept. Although this sounded momentous, very important, in real life nothing much changed. The high government jobs, civil services, military leadership, etc. remained closed for Indians. Indians were only allowed to take minor, low-level jobs. A British historian, Keith, wrote, Section 87 was an excellent idea, but not practically important. Why? Because another older rule from the Act of 1793 was still active. That rule said, only covenanted servants, basically British people officially hired in London, could take jobs with salaries above £500 per year. Indians could never become such covenanted servants. So in practice, Indians were locked out of top jobs. Example for clarity. Imagine your school says, all students are equal. Anyone can become head boy or head girl. But then, secretly, they also say, only students who were born in London can apply. Then obviously, Indian students can never become head boy girl. That is exactly what happened here. Question 3. Why this section became important later. Indians were very angry because they saw that the British spoke of equality, but didn't follow it. Over time, Indians started saying, you promised us equality in 1833. Why are you breaking it? This became a major reason for political agitation in India later. Leaders used Section 87 as a weapon to demand jobs, rights, and finally self-rule. That's why historians call Section 87 a sheet anchor of Indian political struggle, a main supporting idea that guided the freedom movement. 4. Slavery in India. The Act of 1833 also told the Indian government, start improving the condition of slaves and work towards ending slavery. After 10 years, in 1843, slavery was finally abolished in India through Act 5 of 1843. That meant keeping slaves or treating humans as property became illegal. Example for clarity. Before 1843, if a rich man owned 10 slaves, it was allowed. After 1843, those slaves were free human beings. The rich man could no longer own them. Big picture, why this act matters. 1. On paper, law books, it looked revolutionary, equality for Indians, end of discrimination, end of slavery. 2. In reality, equality was not applied to important jobs. Indians still faced racial discrimination. Slavery ended, but economic inequality, poor peasants, bonded laborers, remained. 3. Long-term impact. Indians started saying, you promised us in 1833 that race religion doesn't matter. Keep your word. This promise became one of the early sparks of Indian political awakening. Later, leaders like Dadabhai Naoroji, R.C. Dutt, and the Indian National Congress repeatedly reminded the British of Section 87. In one-line summary, the Charter Act of 1833 promised equality in government jobs and the abolition of slavery, but in reality, Indians were kept out of high posts. This broken promise fueled Indian anger and became a foundation for later political movements. Would you like me to now create a step-by-step comic strip version of this section, like I did earlier, showing how the British said one thing in 1833 but did another in practice? Perfect. Let me now give you a great, deep, detailed summary of your passage on the Act of 1833, also called the Charter Act of 1830, in the simplest way possible. I'll break it into clear points so you understand what it says, but also why it matters. Deep, detailed summary of observations on the Act of 1833. 1. End of company's trade role. Before 1833, the East India Company was both a trading company, doing business, buying and selling things like cloth, and a political ruler in India. The Act of 1833 ended the company's monopoly, exclusive right over tea trade and China trade. With this, the company had no commercial business role left. It became only a political and administrative body. This was a huge shift. India was now being ruled by a company that was acting more like a government rather than a shopkeeper. 2. Separation of business and government. Earlier, the company mixed business profits with governance. For example, it might decide rules based on what helped its trade. After 1833, that stopped. The company could focus only on administration, ruling, law, revenue, governance, etc. Marshman, a historian, said this separation gave a more elevated tone, meaning more dignity and seriousness, to their policies. In short, they started thinking more like rulers of a country, less like businessmen. 3. Codification of laws. Before 1833, Indian law was a big mess. There were many types of laws: Hindu law, Muslim law, company regulations, old customs, British laws in some places, all mixed up. Judges sometimes didn't even know which law to apply in a given case. The Act of 1833 gave the Governor-General power to appoint a law commission. Their job, to study all existing laws, write them down clearly, and make one proper system. This was the start of codified, written, and clear laws in India. Later, this led to famous codes like Indian Penal Code, IPC 1860, Civil Procedure Code, Criminal Procedure Code. Example: before codification, two people might get different judgments in the same case because the law wasn't clear. After codification, there was one written rule everyone followed. 4. Abolition of slavery. The act also aimed to help end slavery in India. Though slavery had existed this was a progressive step. 5. Equal opportunity for jobs. One very modern feature. No one could be denied jobs in India based on religion, birth, race, or color. This meant, in principle, that an Indian Hindu, Muslim, or Christian could apply for services just like an Englishman. Of course, in practice, racial discrimination still existed, but at least the law recognized equality. 6. Parliament's attitude. The act was passed in the British Parliament before empty benches, meaning hardly anyone cared or paid attention. But even though it was ignored in London, for India it was a turning point in history. Why the Act of 1833 was so important? It marked the end of the company as a business. From now, it was just a ruler. It started the system of modern laws in India. It recognized equal job opportunities, at least in words. It moved India one step closer towards being ruled more like a state and less like a trading colony. In very simple words, the Act of 1833 was like saying, okay, East India Company, you are no longer a shopkeeper. Now you are just a ruler. Stop thinking about profit. Think about governing. Also, let's write down clear laws, treat people equally for jobs, and take steps to end slavery. Would you like me to also create a comic strip, like I did before, showing this act step by step in pictures? Company losing trade, focusing on ruling, law book being written, slaves being freed, Indians applying for jobs? Perfect. Let's make the best, deepest, and simplest summary Charter Act of 1833 so that you understand it fully like a story and also remember it for exams. I'll build it layer by layer, no confusion. Charter Act of 1833, deep, simple summary. What was it? A law passed by British Parliament in 1833. Purpose: to renew the East India Company's charter, license contract, which was last renewed in 1813, decided what the company could or could not do in India for the next 20 years. Think of it as the rules of the game for the company in India, updated every 20 years. Number 2. Why was it needed? Background. By 1830s, India was no longer just a place of trade. The company had conquered big territories. The company had two faces. 1, trader, spices, cotton, opium, tea. 2, ruler, collecting revenue, running administration. British industrialists and merchants, factory owners, businessmen, now wanted end of company's trade monopoly, freedom for all British traders to do business in India and with China. A parliamentary committee, 1829 to 1832, studied the company's work and gave a report. Opposition in Parliament argued, why should a private company rule India? Let the Crown take direct control. Decision: don't end company completely, but change its role. Number 3. Main provisions. What did the Act say? A. End of trade. East India Company lost all trading rights in India and China, including opium. From now, company would only administer, govern India, not do business. Example, shopkeeper who also ruled a town is told, close your shop, just rule the town. B. Governor General of India created. Before 1833, Governor General of Bengal was the highest. After 1833, title changed to Governor General of India with authority over all British India. First Governor General of India equals Lord William Bentinck. Example, earlier Bengal's leader was class monitor. Now he became school captain of the whole school. C. Centralized government. Governor General in Council given power to make laws for the whole of British India. Bombay and Madras lost power to make independent laws. Example, earlier each state could make its own rules. Now one central office made rules for everyone. D. Lawmaking body. A separate legislative wing was created inside Governor General's Council, something like a mini parliament for India. E. Open services to Indians. In theory, the Act said Indians could apply for jobs in companies' services without racial discrimination. But in reality, higher posts were still reserved for British. Example, a signboard says, all welcome, but inside, the main seats are still kept for the VIPs only. F. Other points talked about ending slavery. Slavery was officially abolished in India later in 1843. Allowed setting up of a law commission in India to study existing laws and make them uniform. Number 4. Why is it important? Impact. 1. Company stopped being a trader, became only a ruler, political power only. 2. Governor General of India created. First time India was treated as a single political unit under one authority. 3. Start of centralization. Laws for entire India came from one center, Calcutta. 4. Step towards British Crown rule. Prepared the ground for 1858 when company was removed after revolt of 1857. 5. Indians given hope, but not reality. Jobs open in words, but discrimination continued. Super short memory key 1833 equals company quits trade, only rules. India gets one boss, Governor General of India. Central laws start. Indians promised jobs, but not given. This is the D plus simple summary. Background, why, provisions, what, importance, impact, short memory key. Would you like me to now make a story-style timeline comic strip explanation where we show the company changing clothes, from a trader's dress to a ruler's crown under the Act of 1833? That will make it unforgettable. Perfect. Now let me give you the great, deep, detailed summary of everything you shared about the Charter Act of 1833, explained in one connected flow. This will be simple enough for a beginner, yet rich enough for deep understanding. Charter Act of 1833, detailed summary. 1. Background. The East India Company began as a trading company. Over time, it conquered territories in India and became both a trader and a ruler. By the early 1800s, the British Parliament checked its activities every 20 years by renewing its charter. In 1833, Parliament decided to completely change the company's role. Number 2. Political and administrative changes. 1. Governor General of India. Earlier, Bengal's Governor General was the most powerful. Now, he became Governor General of British India, with power over the whole country. First equals Lord William Bentinck. All financial, money, and administrative governing powers were now centralized in his hands and his council. Effect: for the first time, India had one central authority. 2. Madras and Bombay lost powers. Governors of Madras and Bombay were no longer allowed to make laws for their regions. Lawmaking became the exclusive right of the Governor General of India and his council. Effect: centralization of power in Calcutta. 3. Commercial trade changes the company's monopoly, exclusive right, on trade with China, trade in tea. Both were ended. The company could no longer trade at all. From now, it was only an administrative and ruling body. Effect: company stopped being a shop and became only a governor. Governor General's Council, number of members fixed at 4. But the 4th member had a special role. He could only take part in legislative matters, lawmaking, not in administration. First such member equals Lord Macaulay. Effect: separation of lawmaking from day-to-day administration. 5. Law and codification. The Act tried to codify all Indian laws, bring them together in a systematic written form. First Law Commission of India was set up. Chairman equals Lord Macaulay. This led to important laws later, such as the Indian Penal Code, IPC. Effect: start of modern legal system in India. Number 6. Parliament's control. Even though the Governor General made laws in India, British Parliament remained supreme. Parliament could overrule Indian laws, repeal, cancel them. All laws made in India had to be sent to London and were called acts. Effect: proved that India was under ultimate control of Britain. 7. Civil services, jobs. Earlier, jobs in the company were given by favoritism or family connections. This act approved open competition for recruitment. The Court of Directors would nominate candidates, 4 times the number of posts. Then a competitive exam would be held. Effect: first step towards a merit-based system. Later became the Indian Civil Service, ICS, and today's UPSC exams. 8. Importance of the Act. 1. Company stopped being a trading body, became only a ruling body. 2. India treated as one political unit under Governor General of India. 3. Centralization of power. Madras and Bombay lost independence in lawmaking. 4. Start of modern legal system with codification and Macaulay's Law Commission. 5. Civil service reform began. Exams slowly replaced favoritism. 6. Parliament's supremacy confirmed. India's laws subject to London's approval. 9. Memory line, super short. 1833 Act equals company no trade, only rule. India gets one boss, Bentinck. Central laws from Calcutta. Macaulay starts codifying laws. Parliament supreme. Jobs by competition. In short, the Charter Act of 1833 was a turning point. It ended the company's trading role, created the post of Governor General of India, centralized administration, began codification of laws, introduced civil service reform, and kept Parliament's control over Indian laws. Would you like me to now make a visual diagram/chart summary, like boxes and arrows, so you can recall all the points in one glance for exams? All right, let's now create a great, deep, detailed, very simple summary of the impact of the Charter Act of 1833. I'll break it down slowly, like teaching someone who has never read about it before. Think of it like a story plus explanation in everyday words. Summary of the impact of the Charter Act 1833. 1. Company becomes only administrator, not trader. Before 1833, the East India Company was both a trader, buying, selling goods like tea, cotton, and opium, and an administrator, ruler of territories in India. This act ended the company's trading rights completely. That means, from now on, no business, no selling goods, only governance, administration of Indian lands on behalf of the British Crown. Example, imagine a shopkeeper who is also the head of the town. He runs his shop and also makes rules. The 1833 Act told him, now stop shopkeeping, you only be the ruler. 2. Focus shifts to administration. Since business was stopped, the company could now fully concentrate on ruling India. Historians say this gave a higher tone to their work. Why? Because making profit from trade can lead to selfish policies, but focusing only on administration made them look more serious about ruling. Example, a teacher who runs a side business might not give full time to students. But if she stops business, she gives her full energy to teaching. Same happened here. 3. Uniform laws and justice. Earlier, laws in India were confusing, scattered, and sometimes different from place to place. The Act made arrangements for a uniform policy. Laws would be the same everywhere, and justice would be more organized. Example, imagine in one town, driving on the left side is legal, and in another town, driving on the right is legal. That would confuse travelers. The Act tried to make one rule for all. 4. Law Commission created 1834. To make this legal system better, the Act created a law commission. Thomas Babington Macaulay was made the first law member. This was very important because he and his team started writing proper legal codes for India. 5. Creation of Indian Penal Code, IPC. The Commission's biggest work, the Indian Penal Code, IPC. IPC equals the main law book that defines crimes and punishments in India. Example, it says what counts as murder, theft, cheating, etc., and what punishments follow. Even today, IPC, though later amended, remains the backbone of Indian criminal law. One British officer, Alfred Lyell, said the IPC is a standing tribute, permanent proof of Macaulay's intelligence and skill in law. 6. Civil and criminal procedure codes. Besides IPC, the Commission also prepared rules for civil procedure, how civil cases like land disputes, property, money should be handled in courts. Criminal procedure, how criminal cases like theft, murder, fraud should be handled step by step. These codes simplified the earlier confusing systems and made law more systematic. Example, earlier, each teacher in a school had their own method of checking exams. The new rules said, follow this single method so that everyone is treated equally. In short, very simple takeaway. The Charter Act of 1833 ended the company's trade forever. Company now only ruled. This gave full focus to administration and improved the seriousness of governance. It led to uniform laws across India. It created a law commission under Macaulay. It produced the Indian Penal Code and Procedure Codes, which became the foundation of India's modern legal system. So, the biggest impact equals, the Act separated trade from administration and laid the foundation of modern law in India. Would you like me to now make a visual diagram chart summary, like a flowchart or table, so you can instantly recall the impacts in one glance?
Got it. Let's now pull everything together into a deep, detailed, yet simple summary of the Charter Act of 1833. I'll expand it like a teacher, giving you a clear story with background, provisions, results, and importance. Charter Act of 1833, Detailed Summary 1. Background. Before 1833, the East India Company was both a trading company selling goods like spices, tea, opium, and also a political ruler, controlling large parts of India. Earlier Acts 1773, 1781, 1784, 1793, 1813 slowly reduced its trading power and gave more control to the British Parliament. By 1833, the British wanted to end the company's trade monopoly and make it purely a political administration. 2. Main provisions of the Act. A. Equality in jobs. The Act said that there should be no discrimination in government jobs based on caste, race, birth, religion. This removed the unfair rule made by Lord Cornwallis, 1793, that had barred Indians from high jobs in the company's services. In theory, an Indian could now hold top posts. In practice, the British still kept Indians out of top jobs for decades, but this law became an important promise of equality. Became a political body. The company stopped being a trading company. It became only a political and administrative body, ruling India on behalf of the British Crown. C. Legislative powers. The Governor-General's Council in India got power to make laws for all British territories in India. Before this, they could only make small regulations. Now they could make full laws like a parliament. A law member was added to the council. Macaulay was the first. D. End of slavery. The Act abolished slavery in India. This was a major humanitarian reform. People could not be treated as property or forced into bonded slavery. E. Trade changes. The company's monopoly on trade with China in opium was ended. Others could also join this trade. This meant the company lost almost all trade functions except tea and opium trade for a while. F. Land ownership for Europeans. Europeans were now allowed to buy land in. This led to increase in indigo cultivation in Bengal. Indigo was in high demand in Europe for blue dye. British landlords forced Indian peasants to grow indigo on rice lands. This caused severe exploitation, torture, and suffering for Indian farmers. G. Administrative division. The Act allowed creation of a new province, Northwestern Province, Agra and nearby areas, but it was not created immediately at that time. 3. Impact of the Act. 1. Political impact. Company officially became only a political ruler, not a trading body. Centralized lawmaking in India under the Governor-General's. 2. Social impact. Declared equality for all subjects in job opportunities. Though not practiced, it became a powerful slogan for future Indian leaders. Slavery abolished, a progressive step. 3. Economic impact. European land ownership, rapid growth of indigo plantations, led to Indigo Revolt, 1859–60, later, because peasants were brutally oppressed. Company lost its China opium monopoly, reducing its trade profits. Number 4. Historical importance. Equality clause became the foundation of Indian political movements. Leaders like Dadabhai Naoroji, R.C. Dutt, later Congress leaders, always reminded the British of this promise. It showed how Britain was shifting from a trading company to a colonial government. It marked a step towards legal modernization, since the Governor-General's Council could make laws. Macaulay later prepared the Indian Penal Code under this. But it also led to greater exploitation of peasants, especially in Bengal, due to land rights given to Europeans. Dashed in one sentence. The Charter Act of 1833 ended the East India Company's role as a trading business, turned it into a ruling body, declared equality for Indians in jobs, abolished slavery, gave power to make laws, allowed Europeans to buy land, leading to indigo exploitation, and laid the foundation for future Indian political movements demanding fairness. Would you like me to also make a visual chart diagram, like a table or flowchart, showing the provisions, impacts, importance of this act? That way you'll remember it instantly at a glance.